I've seen a few times the last, especially today, and I don't know if this is the red car effect where if you see a red car, you're looking for a red car, you're going to see 100 of them. But I've seen today a few people talking about the calm before the storm. And I'm curious your thoughts on that, because I don't know that it's necessarily calm, but there's definitely a storm. What are your thoughts? Is this a sort of a calm before the storm type moment, or is it more of a perpetual calm before the storm?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't describe it as calm at all. I mean, they've been eroding the nuclear family in our society for many, 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 many years. And it's just culminating more and more and more to where there's really not a lot of options left on the table for them, right? And, they talk about how as a society collapses, that the laws become more absurd and that the things become more absurd. For example, putting litter boxes in classrooms, right? And so I don't think it's a calm at all. I would argue that this is just more and more and more and more and more until eventually it's going to get to this breaking point, and then we're all in for it.
Yeah. And that sort of, I feel exactly the same way, because you look at what's going on at the border and who is it that's coming across on the border, whether that be, Chinese, Latin American, whatever it is. There is an absolute flood. The floodgates have been opened, and it begs the question of how intentional and why this is happening, other than to change the demographics of the United States. But that's sort of where I am with the whole, is it more concerning the things that are going on within, or should we be concerned? We were chatting a little bit in the beginning before the show that something is building, something is moving this way. I don't know when it's going to be. You were mentioning, World War III seems pretty inevitable, and I tend to agree with that. Again, who knows when, but it seems like, and maybe you get your thoughts on this. It seems like to me that it would benefit if things are going so bad here in the United States, where behind the scenes, they understand that we're at a breaking point. Wouldn't that be something that would either deflect attention, or give them the excuse to completely break things down and rebuild it?
Yeah, well, I mean, they can't get rid of the petrodollar if they don't first collapse it. They can't get rid of America's might if they don't first collapse it. They can't get rid of our standing in the world if they don't first collapse it. I mean, this is 101, right? I mean, you're not going to do any of those things. And, they talk about Agenda 2130, all of these different things. But the fact of the matter is you can't bring the bottom up without bringing the top down if we're all supposed to be equal, right? Common core. And so I think it's absolutely on purpose. I think it is absolutely 100% on purpose. And I think it started many, 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 many years ago. You talked about World War III, and it is inevitable, in my opinion. And I've spent much time thinking about this. And at the end of the day, America's status in the world is waning, and it's declining. And I don't think that NATO and America can afford to let Ukraine lose, because if they do, the dominoes begin to fall. I think they know this. The flip to that is I don't think Vladimir Putin will back down. And I think China and Russia and Iran and our enemies out there in the world today know we're weaker today than we have ever been. And anybody who's read any of the Art of War books, I mean, any of these kind of things will tell you always attack your enemy at its weakest.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the way I see it.
Yeah. And there's sort of like two sides to that, I think, because you think about how we could be prolonging this because it weakens Russia and things like that. But at the same time, the billions of dollars we're throwing at that is weakening us. And you've got China sitting on the sidelines, which I go back and forth on how big of a threat they actually are, or is it all smoke and mirrors and all that? But at the same time, and I talked about the southern border, they could, be sending troops, through or fighting aged men, maybe not troops, but fighting aged men, something like that, planning behind the scenes for all the stuff that you were just talking about, because NATO and the United States and Russia, everybody's becoming weaker, but except for maybe China. And I know their financial system is wonky and all that, but Iran is getting stronger, as much as they can. North Korea is launching rockets all the damn time. So it is almost like that sort of old school Axis and allies type situation forming I mean, and the pieces are there. It's just, are they going to, come together? And I think if something does come to a head, like you were talking about, how there's neither side wants to step down. Putin certainly is not going to.
No.
And with NATO, I don't think I don't see that either. Although it would be, I think, a little bit easier to fracture the whole NATO thing than one guy. But so, I tend to agree. And I think there's, like I said earlier, a little bit something almost like intentional about the whole thing. Like they know this is where it's going, and you've got the military industrial complex and all that. They know this is where it's going. It's just a matter of time and how they can, put their chess pieces in place for this to go down.
They want it to go there. The American military complex want it to go there. They want it to go here because this is the only way we're going to hide all the stuff going on at home.
Yeah.
They want to go to war because if they go to war, maybe they can get the economy booming again. Maybe these things can happen, and it'll be a huge distraction to Epstein Island, to all of the craziness that's gone on in our world. I think it's the ultimate distraction, and I think they want it.
Yeah. When you think about politicians and how they, more so than I ever remember, completely disregard the American people. It is no longer about us whatsoever. The middle class, even lower class, unless you're up there in the high class, and then you're okay. But it is no longer about us. So when it reaches that boiling point, what a better way to stomp all that down, distract everybody with, or maybe things get so expensive that we can't afford to live, and then people start getting pissed off, and the uprising starts. What a better way to squash that and distract people than with something big like that. Then it's like, hey, this is why everything is so expensive. We're fighting for your freedom. We're doing this for you. Right. Yeah, bunch of BS.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you though, but I don't really think that an invasion of mainland United States is likely in any way, and I could give you lots of reasons why. That you could talk about the Chinese military, who they have more boats, but most of their boats are diesel powered, and their range is very, very small. You could talk about the declining population pyramid in all of these countries. You could talk about the number of aircraft carriers they have, and we go through all these things. But here's the thing: we are the only country in the world that teaches our kids to hate our country.
Yeah.
They don't have to come here. They can use, 5th, 6th generation warfare. They can hit us economically. They can EMP us. They can do all of these other things. They never have to put a boot here. And half of America will take it with a thundering applause and say, yes, this is wonderful.
Yeah.
Because we're the only country in the world that teaches our kids to hate our country.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, it didn't used to be like that 20 years ago.
No.
A completely different state, as a state of mind for the American people 20, 30, 40 years ago than it is today. Almost like we feel guilty, not us, most Americans feel guilty for being American, and it's ridiculous. Yeah.
China could shut us down with an email.
Yeah.
Fact.
Yeah.
100% fact.